Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Timothy Nachef, and I am the middle school and young adults pastor here at Beachpoint. Thank you. Cool. Did my job. Great. I'm kidding. Well, hope you guys are all doing well. Listen, this weekend is a really exciting weekend for my wife, Julie, and I, because it marks 52 weeks of Sundays. Julie and I have been a part of Beachpoint, and we've really loved being a part of such a God-loving community, our new home, and we just thank you guys for that. And yeah, being able to do life and ministry with y'all. Well, this morning, I had the privilege in helping us continue in our series on David, trusting God in times of uncertainty. And so with that today, we're going to dive deeper into David's story. I hope you'll hear more about that story, a little bit about me and what God's done in my life and how Jesus points to all of that. And so a few weeks ago, Julie and I got to go to Maui, my first time to Maui ever with her family. And listen, I love Maui. If I'm moving anywhere, it's over there. And her family's been there. They go every other year for a number of years. And it was my first time. Now that we're married, I got to go with them on the trip. And it was an awesome experience. And so we get there, and Julia's dad says that her and I have to do the road to Hana together. So if you don't know anything about the road to Hana, well, first, I know we have a lot of Beachpoint people who are like, Maui aficionados. I get it. But for those of you who don't know what that is, the road to Hana is pretty much a long journey that you take from wherever you're at all the way to this place called Hana. And it's not really about Hana. It's about everything you do along the way. So you're making stops through the rainforest, waterfalls, you're getting banana bread and ice cream and all these fun things, and it's a really cool experience that takes a long, long time, like 12 hours through the rain and windy, slim mountain roads, and it's a really cool experience. And so we woke up our second day early in the morning, we load up the rental car, and my job is to drive. I'm making sure we're not falling off the mountain. And Julia, her job is to make sure we know where we're going, right? We're stopping at the cool places, we're staying on track with time, we're doing all the fun things and getting to see all the fun stuff all the way to Hana and back. Well, if you know anything about Julia, she's a researcher. She knows how to find the stuff. And so instead of just finding all the cool stops, she finds an app called the Shaka Guide. And the Shaka Guide is really cool. Pretty much it's Apple CarPlay for the road to Hana. So you plug in your phone to the car and it tells you everything. It tells you your GPS location, it tells you where to stop, where to park, all the historical facts. It even plays 12 hours of Hawaiian music on repeat. It's a fun experience. And so we follow this thing for the 12-hour day, and it's telling us where to stop, and we do the whole trip and back. Well, about 2/3 of the way to Hana, the GPS comes up, Shaka Guide, he tells us in 1 mile, you can stop at the lava tube that's only known to locals. So pull over to the side of the road, cross the street, and you get to experience a lava tube. Now, I didn't know what a lava tube was, and it goes on to explain that a lava tube is pretty much when a volcano erupts and lava pours. When the outside cools a lot faster than the inside pours out, and you're left with a cave that you can go into. And so the Shaka Guide's telling us, you better go through this thing. It's cool. It's the local spot. You have to go through it. No one else knows about it. It's a cool thing. I'm like, okay, I'm stopping there. And so we pull over to the side of the road, and I'm kind of feeling weird about it. Not that I didn't want to do it, but my expectations were like every other 15 stop we did before. We have street signs and parking lot lines and people trying to sell you parking passes and food and banana bread and all these things and souvenirs. So I'm thinking we're going to pull up to something like this, but there's nothing. There's mountain road, cliff, and mountain. That's all I'm seeing. And so we pull over to the side of the road on a dirt turnout, and I remember the Shaka Guide says, get out of the car and cross the street and you'll enter the lava tube. So we get out of the car, and I'm looking across the street, and Julia says, come on, let's go. And I'm saying, where? And she's like, right there. And I say, I don't see anything. I just see Green Mountain. That's what I've been seeing for the last 6 hours. She says, it's right there. Look at it. So we cross the road, and we see this. And I start squinting to look, and I'm seeing a hole. All right, I'm not expecting this. Normally there's entrances and signs and all that stuff. I'm just seeing mountain at this point. Maybe you see it, but when you're seeing the grand scheme of all of the giant mountain you're on, I'm not seeing anything. And so we walk up, and as I get closer, I realize this thing's not a big entrance. This is it'd be too small for a hobbit. It's somewhere between a crawl space and a car door opening. And we got to go through to a cave. I'm like, okay, I guess we should do that. So I have a video of me going through, and we get through. At this point, there's people around us, but there's no one, right? Remember, this is the local spot. Tourists don't know about this. Cars are just zipping by like they're going down the mountain. But for me, I'm crawling through this rainy rainforest cave and all that. We get through, me as my athletic, agile body's getting through. And so I get through, and guess what? We had the fun, exciting thing of darkness. It's a cave in the inside of the mountain. We drove 6 hours to see nothing. And so we pull through, open our dinky phone flashlights, and we see a cave. Yay. So we're walking through the cave. We crawling through, hike over some rocks, whatever. We turn a corner, and I see people, and I scream out of my mind, thinking, wow, this is the Maui monster. But we turn the corner, follow them. They go along with us, and finally we see some light. And we get to the end of the tunnel. There is light, and we enter to what is an escape to a beautiful bamboo forest. You can see the next picture. It's Julia standing right there. And I would never thought, just a hole in the mountain could lead all out to that. And so we get through, we go back around, so we take our pictures, and you're hearing other people. When we got there, like I said, there's no one. But by this time, the people driving by are seeing people emerging from a small hole in the mountain. So people are stopping. At this point, we have 30 people now taking photos and pictures and driving through and all that, or walking through, and ended up being a really cool hidden gem for the whole trip. I don't know if it's actually a local spot. Maybe the Shaka guide was just hyping it up. But it felt like a cool, unknown thing to me. Especially to go through to see such a beautiful thing. It was the highlight of my trip, this hidden gem of the lava tube. Well, what's really cool about this morning is that the story we get to look at in David's life is a hidden gem. It's something that you could easily drive past and not notice. It's something you could look at and see, cool, it's just another part of David's life, but I think that exhibits the love, the grace, the heart of Jesus far greater than any other part of David's life. See, if I were to tell you to list the top 20 stories of the Bible that come to mind, I doubt this story would even make the top 50. And I honestly don't know why. But today I'm really excited for us to talk about it together to see, where does Jesus fall in all this? Where does kindness that we see from God come in all this? And so it leaves us with our big idea for today. Our big idea is that the kindness we show to others shows God's kindness towards us. The kindness we show to others shows God's kindness towards us. So, if you have your Bibles, open them with me to 2 Samuel chapter 9. As you make your way there, I'll kind of fill you in on what we've kind of journeyed with up until this point and some things in between. So, we know David. David is anointed as king by the prophet Samuel, and he goes and defeats Goliath, and then Saul the king, brings him into a circle, and then David is no longer in the circle with Saul, and he's on the run for 15 years from Saul. And so Saul and Jonathan, Saul's son, they die in battle. Jonathan and David are best friends. That's a sad moment. But now David is now officially anointed, crowned as king over Israel, and is in Jerusalem. And so right before we get to this chapter, in chapter 9, we're seeing David has defeated the enemies around him. I think it's like the Arameans and the Philistines and the neighboring enemies. And now we see that he's at the height of his royal glory. He's not just a king, this little king boy. Now he's king over a nation of prosperity and wealth and unity. And now he is king on the throne. And so normally when a king goes through a change of power, has now taken over a kingdom from a previous line of kings, it would be customary for the king to go and kill off anyone from the previous line of the throne. So you could imagine he would go and try to find Saul's line and kill them. So he'd find sons and grandsons and wives and probably dogs and cats too, just to make sure there's no threat or opposition at all. We see this in other places in the Bible too. We see Pharaoh in the Old Testament and King Herod in the New Testament. He wants to kill off the newborn baby boys because they don't want any threat to a new king coming into power. So it would be customary for that to happen, but David does the opposite. He does the opposite of this, as we'll read in verse 1. It says this. We'll read if you follow along. It says this. David asked, "Is there anyone still left at the house of Saul to whom I can show kindness for Jonathan's sake?" I know it's early in the passage, but we'll pause there for now. So he goes to some government official, an aide, a servant, whatever, and he asks, "Hey, is there anyone still alive from Saul's line?" First part of the question would be practical for a king if they're seeking out the line. But then the second half, he says, "So I can show kindness on behalf of Jonathan." That seems weird for a king to do that, especially like a king was just taken over, all these enemies, there's prosperity and unity, and the first thing he wants to do is find if there's a son or grandson of Saul. Well, we have to track back just a little one more time. See, David and Jonathan had a covenant, a promise, an agreement with each other. See, Jonathan goes to David one day and is like, hey, look, I know that you are the true and rightful king. I know that throne of Israel is yours, and my father Saul does not want to give it up. And instead, he wants you to die so that he can keep it, that he can stay in power. But I know that you're the true king. So I ask that you would make a promise to show kindness to my family, to the people after me, that you would not kill them, you would not annihilate them, that we'd make a covenant that you would show that kindness. See, that covenant is of no benefit to David, especially now that Saul and Jonathan are gone. Jonathan's dead. Why does that promise matter anymore? It'd be of no benefit for him to leave any threat of the throne available, but David still keeps his covenant. It goes on to say this, verses 2 through 5. Now there was a servant of Saul's household named Ziba. They summoned him to appear before David, and the king said to him, "Are you Ziba?" "At your service," he replied. The king asked, "Is there no one still alive from the house of Saul to whom I can show kindness?" Ziba answered the king, "There is a son of Jonathan. He's lame in both feet." "Where is he?" the king asked. Ziba answered, "He is at the house of Machir, son of Ammiel, in Lo-debar." So King David had him brought from Lo-debar, from the house of Machir, son of Ammiel. So David finds a previous servant of Saul named Ziba, asks him, "Hey, do you know if there's anyone still related to Saul?" And he says, "Yeah, there's a guy, he can't walk." Cool, that's not very much information. I would imagine that Ziba doesn't really want to share much because he doesn't really feel like it's worth mentioning this guy. See, he's from a place called Lo-debar, and if you were to translate that from Hebrew to English, Lo-debar means no pasture. I don't think a place of like high real estate value, beachfront, luscious green property would be a place called no pasture. It's nothing worth recognizing. It has a name, it's trying to describe it. It's a barren, dry place. No crops grow there, nothing happens. So this guy's from there. So what we know so far, there's a son, he's from a place not recognizing, and he can't walk. And so David says, "I don't care. I want him brought to me. Bring him to me." So he brings him to him, and we get to meet him in the next verse. It says this in verses 6 through 8. When Mephibosheth, say Mephibosheth. Great, you guys are going to mess up with me. Son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, came to David. He bowed down to pay him honor. David said, "Mephibosheth." "At your service," he replied. "Don't be afraid," David said to him, "for I will surely show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan. I will restore to you all the land that belonged to your grandfather Saul, and you will always eat at my table." Mephibosheth bowed down and said, "What is your servant that you should notice a dead dog like me?" So we finally meet Jonathan's son, Mephibosheth. We get a little bit of backstory a few chapters before on him. See, when he was 5 years old at the change of powers between kings, Mephibosheth had to go on the run, right? The customary for his line to be killed off. So he goes on the run. As a young boy, he's picked up, and as they're running, he's dropped, and he becomes crippled from the drop. So we know he can't walk. We know he's on the run. We know he's in the place called Lo-debar, and then we know his name. And his name actually means something too. It's not a good translation or a fun translation. It translates roughly to breath of shame. I doubt any of you are naming your children breath of shame, especially not for any good reason. And so Mephibosheth, most likely scholars believe that he has some sort of breathing issue or speech issue or something that is another ailment to his body. So all we know about him at this point, he's from a place not worth recognizing, and his body is not in the best condition. So we know that it almost seems like a waste of time for David to even consider either showing kindness or the opposite to him. But David wants to do something for him. David keeps his covenant in this way. See, on the way from Lo-debar to Jerusalem, where David's at, I bet Mephibosheth was shaking in his boots, not knowing what's going to happen, thinking, this is the time they found me. I'm caught, my cover's blown, and now the king is going to kill me. My life's going to end. But David says, don't be afraid, don't be afraid. I'm not going to do that to you. I actually want to restore what was your grandfather's to you. I want to show you the kindness I promised from Jonathan, and all that was the previous kings, I'm going to give to you. See, Mephibosheth says my favorite line in response to this in the passage. He says, what is your servant that you should notice a dead dog like me? See, Mephibosheth senses maybe this idea of his own worthlessness, at least what on the picture up front seems like is. See, I'll say again, he's from a place which has no value. His name has no value. His body practically has no value, and yet the king still wants to recognize him. He probably thinks that he's worthless, yet the king doesn't. He replies, King David, I'm a dead dog. Like, where in my life do you see any sort of worth giving kindness to, keeping a promise to a dead dog like me? But David doesn't care about that. Instead, he says this, the last few verses of this passage. In verse 9. Then the king summoned Ziba, Saul's steward, and said to him, I have given your master's grandson everything that belonged to Saul and his family. You and your sons and your servants are to farm the land for him and bring in the crops so that your master's grandson may be provided for. And Mephibosheth, grandson of your master, will always eat at my table. Now Ziba had 15 sons and 20 servants. It's a lot of sons. Then Ziba said to the king, your servant will do whatever my lord the king commands his servants to do. So Mephibosheth ate at David's table like one of the king's sons. Mephibosheth had a young son named Micah, and all the members of Ziba's household were servants of Mephibosheth. And Mephibosheth lived in Jerusalem because he always ate at the king's table. He was lame in both feet. So David restores all that was Saul's back to Mephibosheth. We see that. And now Ziba and his household and his servants, his 17 sons and 20 servants, whatever, are now Mephibosheth's, right? We go from 0 to 100 real quick. He's someone far away with nothing to his name, and now he is practically a king again. We know that David says for the fourth time at this point, after all that, for the fourth time, and you will always eat at my table. He wants to make it clear, I'm not just giving you this to appease you or just to keep a covenant just because I said I would. David invites him to eat at his table. Friends, we could end our story there, and I could say goodbye, and we could end and be happy and say, cool, be nice to the people around you, be like David, be nice, keep your promises, goodbye. But we're not going to end there. See, it can be one thing to say, be kind, like, the helpful Honda people who go pay for someone's gas or groceries or whatever, help them load their bags into the car. We could be like that and be dandy. But this story is not about that type of kindness. This story is not about the kindness of a man, but this is a story that's really about the perfect kindness of our God. See, honestly, I see myself in the story, not as David or as a servant or as God. I see myself as Mephibosheth. In my story and what God has done in my life, I am the Mephibosheth in my story. See, I grew up in a church in Palos Verdes. Grew up there. My parents and my family have been there since the mid-'70s. I have been the son of, my mom's been on staff. She's been the choir director for most of my life, or more than just my life. My dad's been an elder for most of my life. My whole family's been planted there. Church has been ingrained in me. I even was in private school for almost 12 years, private Christian school. Like, this idea of being a Christian has been ingrained in me since the time I was born. My parents wanted to do everything they could to make sure I had this example of Jesus before me at all times. And so, Grew up in church and modeled like my parents. I served too. So once I got through all of Sunday school and the midweek programs and all that stuff, volunteered in kids and in youth and led worship and did all the tech stuff and became like this identity of church being the place that was ingrained in me. But I never understood what it meant beyond that. See, I took it so seriously that church was the place where I do my life for Jesus that when I went to outside the church, I had no idea what that meant. I was really good at wearing a jersey that said Jesus and then took it off as soon as I walked out of the doors. That when I did my own life, Jesus stayed in the pews over here and I went and did life on my own. So when I got to high school and got my own independence and started driving and all that, that idea only grew. So if I'm doing life on my own, I got to do everything for myself. And so my intentions in life were just to be the better version of me. Look the best, act the best, have the best skills and personality, and be the show person that everyone can look at and ooh and ah at. And so my life became about how can I make Timothy look better for everyone who he passes. And when it came to setting an example of Jesus in my life, I didn't know what that meant. So Jesus was the back burner thing when I was out away from my parents and my church. And I got to church and, I'm a good Christian boy who knows all the answers, knows Sunday school, and wants to serve Jesus with his whole heart. And that was it. It had no meaning outside of the surface. And so, get to the end of high school, I'm ready to go to the college of my dreams, become a successful engineer, make myself be as successful as I can be, as I've been set up to do. And it comes to an end pretty quickly. See, if you know anything about me, a fun fact about my family, everyone on my mom's side are watchmakers and clockmakers. And so that's what I've been trained to do. We do a little bit of woodworking, fun stuff. It's kind of like a passion of mine. And so my senior year, one night, I'm working on a fun school project using a table saw, and it didn't end well, I'll tell you that. My hand went right through. I don't recommend ever doing that to yourself. And so it was a crazy accident that I thought, I'm going to go to the doctors and they're going to tell me your hand's going to get cut off, your arm's going to cut off, something like that. I don't know what's happening. Like, I show up and they say, okay, it's not great, but you only have damage to the top of your index finger. And I said, cool, I'll be back in school, put a Band-Aid on it, we'll be fine. It actually wasn't the case. It ended up being months of reconstructive surgery, which left me completely with no immunity. So then I had infections and sicknesses for another few months, so that left me out of school. So now I'm ripped away from this idea of, the place where I felt, I was doing things on my own, right? So we got that out of the way. God's like, boom, out the door. So I'm stuck at home, and I thought, cool, this could be a cool space for me to get right with God. But instead, being stuck in bed or on a couch for a few months really just left me the opposite. There's this bitterness, this anger, this resentment, this feeling of frustration that built up to explode, to be like, God, why would you do this to me? God, I've given you my entire life. I took the paper and I checked off all the boxes. Went to church, knows the Bible, looks like a good Christian boy, does these things, blah, 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 blah. I checked off the boxes and I presented God with the report card, and that did nothing for me. I said, God, I've given you all this, and this is how you punished me? God, I'm your servant. God, I'm who you told me to be, and this is how you respond? And that only left me in that place for the next year and a half. Get to college, and my life doesn't look any better internally. Yeah, I heal up. My body looks fine. I get to college. I do my own thing. I'm functioning well, but internally, God's the furthest thing from me. Yeah, I believed in God, but God's over there. God doesn't care about me, so I shouldn't care about God. Yeah, I should believe that Jesus did this thing on the cross, so cool, that's a cool history thing. That has no implication on my life because clearly that wasn't meant for me. See, I didn't think God had wanted anything to do with me, so that's how I made my life nothing to do with God. Partied my way through college, the first year, friends, same thing. And then, on the outward, I'm still going to church, I'm still serving, I still wear the Jesus jersey, part of campus ministries in college, all that stuff, but it didn't mean anything outside of my times there. But it did change. There wasn't a big moment. There's not like, Jesus shining his light, like, you need to come back to me. There wasn't that. But there was a conversation that happened with my friends. We're hanging out, They don't care about Jesus. They don't care about the Bible. They're my friends that were fun and cool to hang out with because I didn't have to put on the facade. So we're hanging out, and we have a fun conversation. We're hanging out, doing our thing, and something comes up where I'm like, oh, yeah, I know that because I'm a Christian. That's what Christians do. And they say, no, you're not. I say, yes, I am. You know my family or whatever. I've gone to church. I know the Bible. And I said, no. We know that you've been raised as a Christian. We know you've gone to church. We know that this is what a Christian does. And you're not that. Your life doesn't show that in any way. And I'm like, who are you to say? Like, you don't know the Bible. You don't know what Jesus does. And they say, yeah, we don't know all that much. But at least what we're supposed to know, you're none of that. Let me tell you about a slap in the face when even the non-Christians can't see through the facade. See, I realized there had to have been a change in some sense, but I didn't know what that change was, and I didn't really want to make it because that took work, and I didn't feel like doing that. So I'm still involved in church, so in times of worship, I still, I feel this conviction and this movement towards maybe I should make a decision in my life, maybe take some action to what God is doing. But for me, I didn't like that. Because I sat there thinking, God, why do you want me back? If, God, you're calling me, you're setting up these moments in my life to come back to you, why do you want me back, God? I'm a worthless dead dog on the side of the road. God, go find someone who actually wants to be with you. Go find someone who's done the right things. Go find someone who actually knows what they're talking about. For me, God, I'm just a two-faced liar. Why would you want me back? See, David does the same thing for Mephibosheth. Someone who seems like a dead dog, but David wants him anyways. See, Jesus does the same for you and me as David did for Mephibosheth. See, we might as well be worthless dead dogs, but the King of the universe decides he wants us to eat at his table. So as we reflect on that, I think of three awesome things that we can take of what Jesus does for us as what David does for Mephibosheth. First, we see that Jesus deems us worthy. See, just like Mephibosheth, apart from Jesus, we are worthless. A life away from Jesus is like being in Lo-Debar, a barren, far place that's far away from the king, with a name that means nothing good, a body that doesn't do good, a life that means nothing, poor and hiding. This is what it's like to have a life away from Jesus. But Jesus comes in, and when he could have other things to do that are probably more important, he decides that his act as our king is to find us and deem us worthy. He could easily say, not. He could say, I'm the king, and anything that gets in my way is dead, and that would be it. But what Jesus offers us is worth from the King and Savior, who's the definition of worth. That the one who is the definition is the one who deems us as worthy. The second is that Jesus gives us new life. See, Jesus could have said, there you go, your label's worthy, you're good now, you're not from Lo-Debar anymore, you're dandy, that's good, have a good life, see you later, see you next time. But he says, no, I have a new home for you. You're going to come with me. I'm going to bring you to a place, to a palace, a place of value, of safety, far from the barren place. See, Jesus gives us a new life by making our life now with him. See, when I did life on my own, I didn't understand that at all. My life was a life for God, not a life with God. And so when I did all the things on the list, I check off all the boxes and I hand it to here, God, this is for you. This is for you, God. You take that, you look at all I've done and all I've proved, you check it, you give it an A+, and you hand it back to me and you say, here are the keys to heaven. But God doesn't want that for us. God wants a life for us to be with him. A life that takes the list, rips it up, throws it in the fire, throws it in the trash can, and says, look, I bring you up here with me. Not do the stuff over there and then we'll check in later. See, there's no amount of anything that could take that worthiness to a new life, but only through the love, grace, and perfect kindness of our Jesus Christ. If you remember our series that we did in Galatians, our verse of focus was Galatians 2, around 19 to 20. It said, for through the law I died to the law, so that I might live for God. I have been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. The life I now live in the body, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. See, that law that's talking about in verse 19, that's the checklist. And Jesus says, I didn't die for the law. I didn't die for you to have this checklist. I died so that you could have new life, that you could have a new body, that you could receive this new life from me and me alone. Lastly, and best of all, Jesus invites us to the table. See, a king's table has to be grand. Right? They're not eating on a poker table in the garage. They're eating in the dining hall with feasts of a long table where all the king's family and officials and guests are invited to. So I want you to picture Beachpoint as David's palace, as the palace of the king. See, when I did a really in-depth architectural research by typing into Google, it told me that Beachpoint's roughly the same size as David's palace. So if you put all our buildings combined, let's say that David's table is on the stage right here. That's where he sits. That's where the feast is happening. That's where all the party is happening. And when David invites Mephibosheth into the palace, he could say, cool, you're good to stay over there at the preschool playground. Like, maybe just right on the sidewalk in Magnolia where our property line ends. You can stay over there, and then the king will do his stuff over here. David doesn't do that. He says, no, you're going to eat at my table. I'm going to pull up a chair, and you're going to sit right next to me, and this is where you're going to be. He doesn't say, look, you have all your wealth, you have all the good things, all the things that the king had before. This is all reserved for you. You can have that and your servants. I'll be here. He says, no. You have that, and you get to do life with me. See, the table is where community and life happens, where meals happen, where vulnerability happens, where the good and bad of life is shared at a table together. And David invites him in. See, Jesus invites us to the table. He doesn't say, you're going to stay over there. We're going to be on good terms. We know that we're friends. We know that I'm God and you're someone who follows me and you can do life with me just at a distance. No, Jesus says, you're going to be invited at my table. You're going to be with me. The King of the universe invites us to sit at the table with him. So as we close this morning, here's where we stand in all this. You and I are Mephibosheth. We are Mephibosheth. Like I said, a life apart from Jesus is like the worthless, no name, no place Mephibosheth. But Jesus comes in and invites us to be with him. See, it says in the story that the king invites Mephibosheth in. Well, in our lives, it's the king of the universe. Instead of David, as the Bible says, it's the son of David who comes in and invites us to do life with him, to eat at his table and to deem us worthy. Jesus offers us this gift of kindness, this gift that no other thing in life could offer us in the same way. It says this in Romans 5:15, but the gift is not like the trespass. For if the many died by the trespass of the one man, how much more did God's grace and the gift that came by the grace of the one man, Jesus Christ, overflow to the many? In other words, this verse is saying that the thing that Adam did, that one man did, that separated us from God, put us in the far barren land, that thing is a lot. That's a lot. That's a big distance. A sin that pulls us away from Christ continually. But what this is saying is that what Jesus offers is so much more than what separates us. It's so much greater than what separates us that our God goes beyond what separates us and gives us so much more than that. So how does this leave us to respond? We know what God does. We know what David does. What does this leave for you and I to do? It leaves us with two things. First, it's for the person who doesn't really know this whole Jesus thing yet. If this gift of kindness, what Jesus does for you and me, deems us worthy, gives us life, invites to the table, if that's new for you, then this is for you. It is the gift and the kindness, the perfect love that Jesus offers us. That is for you. Your response is to accept that gift, to accept that kindness that comes from no one else but the King of the universe. Second is a question that we all can respond to. How can you show the kindness of Jesus to the people around you? How can you show the kindness of Jesus to the people around you? And no, I'm not talking about the kindness I said earlier, the helpful Honda kindness, not like the doing the nice thing. The kindness of Jesus is far greater than just an act of service. But the kindest thing you can do for anyone around you, showing how Jesus deems you worthy, how Jesus gives you new life, and how Jesus invites you to the table. That is the kindest thing you can do for anyone. How can Jesus' kindness show up in your life through how you live yours? Through decisions you make, through the people you're around, through every action of life. How does your life emit the idea that you are deemed worthy now by Jesus, you are given a new life by Jesus, and you are invited to do life with him at his table? That applies to the people you like, the people you don't like, your friends, your family, the people you don't even want to be seen around. Jesus does that for people who are far off. For someone like me who felt like a dead dog, far away, uncertain as to why the King of the universe cares about me. But Jesus goes beyond that. That the gift he gives us so much more. That includes everyone, no matter how far. So we ought to show what Jesus does for us, the people around us, because that is the true and perfect kindness of God. So as we worship in our last song, I want you to think about that. How can you show the kindness of Jesus to the people around you? Let's pray. God, I thank you. Thank you for being a God that wants to know us, God. That a God that we get to know. A God that goes so far beyond what we have done, God, that you want to bring us to the table to do life with you. God, your love and kindness is far greater than what any of us could imagine. I pray that each one of us, as we go into our life, as we go into a new school year, go into a new season, that your kindness would emit from us, God, far greater than anything else. That your true and perfect kindness goes far greater than what any of us could even imagine, God. We love you and we offer our lives to you, God. We thank you for deeming us worthy to be your children. Amen.